Hello and welcome to the Gothic Unicorn. Today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. This is actually going to be a standalone project, still a miniature but a little standalone project, rather than being part of something bigger or a piece that could be used in something bigger. This is going to be something just small and complete. My starting point for this project is this glass egg. Now this is an egg-shaped version of those ornamental baubles that I certainly tend to see quite a bit at Christmas, so you can put your own stuff inside. But this is obviously a specific Easter spring themed one. Now I picked this up several years ago from a store in the UK called The Range, but I'm sure they must be available online. Now this is just under 3 inches high at its tallest point and is about 1.5 inches across. It's not very big, and I did consider at first doing something with a 1/48 scale piece because they're small, you could get them inside and get something quite elaborate in there. But I want something a bit more natural. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go for something that sort of conjures up springtime for me. At least that is the idea. I'm starting today with some air dry clay. Now this is some Das air dry clay, which is a paper clay, as I understand it, and it is really easy to work with. You need to use water to smooth it out, but you can get, if you're any good at sculpting, which I'm not going to try and claim I am, some quite good shapes out of it. I want to make a little stone bird bath, which is going to be the sort of centerpiece of my my little egg. And I've actually got the egg just out of sight so that I can actually eye up what I'm doing. I can actually eye what I'm doing, and I can check it for size, etc. Now I don't want anything that looks too perfect. I want something that looks a bit more natural. Now I've made a couple of bird baths with air dried clay in the past with varying degrees of success, and that's too big, I think. Let me bring this in. Might work. But all I want is I want some sort of little bowl which I'm going to fit onto my sort of chunky little base. It's going to be a bit lopsided because, well, it's me and clay. And me and clay are not exactly the best of buddies. I'm going to get some, now yet again, as with the previous ones I've made, I've got this rather lopsided, so I'm going to try and even things out a bit. I do not claim to be any good with clay. Alright, now I think what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to go and get some water, and I'm going to do some smoothing, and I'm going to trim this off a bit because I don't want it to be too deep. You don't want your bird bath to be that deep, and I'm going to just see if I can make something that I find pleasing. My air dry clay bird bath is now nice and dry. I have actually left this overnight. I wanted to make sure that it was truly dry. And the one thing I will say is, if you're making something like this, I left this on my tile to dry, and then I did turn it over, and that way the bit that's in contact with the surface has a chance to dry out as well. And so I've got my little bird bath, and that actually fits inside my egg. Now I need to paint this, and I'm going to go for my sort of standard stone effect, which is going to begin with a base coat of dark grey, and then I've got two lighter greys, which are light grey, and Storm Cloud, which I will be dry brushing over the top to highlight everything. So that's what I'm going to get on with. I'm going to give this a coat of paint and see how quickly it dries, and how much more we can get on with. And then while I'm waiting for that to dry, I will be back and we'll start work on the egg. Whilst I wait for the paint to dry on my bird bath, I'm going to turn my attention to the egg and to some other things to go inside it. Because I want this to have a spring vibe, I'm going to put some green on the bottom, which I'm going to use moss for. But I can't do that until the bird bath is in place, because obviously the bird bath is the centerpiece. So I've started off by using a dark coloured alcohol marker to just colour the sort of flat bit at the bottom. I just think that if there's a bit of colour underneath there, it's going to be a little less obvious when I start sticking the moss in place. Now, in addition to the bird bath, obviously, I want something that screams spring. And hopefully this is representative enough that it will make you think spring. It is, of course, my version of a daffodil. Now, you can get some really wonderful miniature versions, but this is just my kind of approximation, and it's just made with bits that I've got knocking about. So I've started with a 5-petaled flower that I've punched out from some copier paper that I coloured with a light yellow alcohol marker. I use alcohol markers on copy paper because what happens is it soaks through, and then you don't have to do the other side unless you really want to, but with most colours it's acceptable. I'm just going to put that on my eraser, and I'm going to get a ball tool, because what I want to do is I want to put a bit of shape into my flower, and you could do that just by rubbing the ball tool around the middle of the flower. And I find if you rock into the petals, you get a nice shape. It hasn't got to be perfect. This isn't a daffodil. I think it's something like a cherry blossom or something like that, but I can go with it. I can run with it. It works for me. Now the next thing I need is a small circle which has been punched from some copier paper that has been coloured with an orange colour. Now daffodils, narcissi, come in all different shades, and sometimes they have the same colour, sometimes they don't. I really think about the ones that are sort of yellow with an orangey trumpet as being quintessentially spring, and so that's what I'm going for, or at least I'm trying to. Now the idea here is that I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut a section out, and when I did the first one, which I showed you, I got this to work first time. I have been struggling since. I did another one and not so good. Now the idea is that I now need to make this into a little cone shape. So I'm going to drop it on the desk. This is something that I will drop on the desk multiple times. And basically, if you've ever made any kind of a sort of cone-shaped hat, you know, those party hat type things, you'll have done this, except I'm doing it at a tiny scale. And what I want to do is I want to fold it over so I've actually got something that resembles a cone. So I'm going to finish this off and then come back to you. With the cone sort of formed, if you can see that, I'm going to add a little bit of glue to the back, just to the point. There's far too much glue on my cocktail stick at the moment. And then I'm going to stick this into the centre of my yellow flower. Now I'm going to need to use something. In this case I'm going to use my paper piercer to help position it, because I want it to be sticking up, not at an angle. I've done that with one. So I've gone with daffodils because they are the quintessential spring flower as far as I'm concerned. They are the flower of the month of March, which is when I'm filming this, and that also means that they're my birth flower. I'm not telling you when my birthday is, but it's just a flower that I always associate with my special time of the year, and so I'm going to put them in my special little egg. Once the glue has had a moment to set and I can manoeuvre the flower, I'm going to stick it onto a stem, and for the stem I'm using some green jewellery wire, quite a fine jewellery wire. That's actually 28 gauge. It's just because it's what I happen to have in green and I haven't got to colour the stems. And all I've done is I have made a little bit of a sort of crook, shepherd's crook effect at one end, and I'm going to add a bit of glue onto the end of that bit. I am going to carefully pick up my flower with my tweezers, and I'm going to stick the two together. Now this usually sticks quite quickly, and it has. I haven't used too much glue, and I've got a flower that I'm reasonably happy with. Now if you are interested in a bit more, adding a bit more detail, a bit more depth, you can do what I'm going to do now, which is I'm going to put a little bit more glue onto the back where I've attached the jewellery wire, and then I've got a tiny little green coloured punched circle, which is going to represent, if I can pick the thing up, which is going to represent the sort of, I can't think what it's called, the bit where the stem joins the flower, and you have those, you have green petals, not petals, but you know what I mean. My mind is a blank today, I can't remember my botany, but I've then got a reasonable daffodil. I'm going to probably end up cutting these down when I build my little bunch of them. I'm going to do a few more. I've got 3 so far, one of which is rather flat. I'm going to make my little growing bunch of daffodils, and I will be putting in some leaves, but I'll show you that a little bit later. The paint is now dry on my little bird bath, and I am ready to add the next layer, and I'm using some UV resin. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a very small amount in the bottom, just a sort of dot full, and then I'm going to use my little UV torch to set it. Now I'm going to build this up in layers because I made a practice piece, and it took several days for the UV resin to set properly. Even using the light for quite a period of time, I had to leave it on the windowsill and let the sun do the rest. So I'm going to build this up now with a few layers until I've got what I consider to be a suitable amount of water in my bird bath. And I'm just using clear resin. I'm not putting anything in it to discolour it. In my little fantasy that's behind this little scene, the bird bath has been cleaned out and is all nicely filled up with fresh water. Well, I can dream, can't I? I ended up using 3 thin layers of the UV resin to give the effect of water in my little bird bath. I decided that was enough. I didn't want it completely full, and it's come out okay. I'm happy with it. It's going to work in this situation. This was going to be a piece that people might actually be handling in itself. I might have done things a bit differently, but as it is, I'm happy with it. I'm also happy with my egg. Now, I think I've got a problem with the footage that I took of doing this, but all I've basically done is I've just glued some moss into the bottom of the egg. I've just used my ordinary glue and it has stuck. Again, this is about knowing your glue. My glue has worked on glass before. I wouldn't want it to be used for anything that was going to be messed with, but in this case I think I can get away with it, because once everything's stuck into place, it's not going to be subject to too much interference. My next step is going to be to glue this in, and I'm going to decide which way round I want it. I think I decided that way round. I have a little bit of glue that is quite well set. When I say well set, as this glue starts to set, it goes tackier rather than runny. And I'm going to slip this in. Now, to put this in, and I have put this in previously as a temporary sort of, let's see how it fits, I need to put it in at an angle, and I'm going to push down on that. Now, I'm not putting my finger onto the resin, although the resin has had quite some time to cure, just in case. So I'd actually got my finger over and was just on the clay parts. I'm going to let that cure for a moment, and then we're going to finish off my daffodils. Now, up to this point, the daffodils have got a stem, but they've got no leaves. And what I'm doing to make leaves is I am using a piece of copy paper coloured with a green alcohol marker, and I'm cutting what are basically triangles out. I'm not worrying that they are too exact. I've actually got a few more here, and I'm differing the width of them because of how I'm using them. Now, if you actually look at a daffodil leaf, they're quite fine, but they are thicker at the bottom. And what I'm doing is I'm just going to score my paper piercer about halfway across the bottom. What this means is that I can actually fold them over, so I've got a little bit like that. Now, I'm going to take some glue and I'm going to put it into that fold. And then I'm going to take my flower, and at this point I could do with about 4 hands, but of course I don't have it, I only have 2. So I do things like that where I get it stuck to my fingers. Don't worry, it happens to all of us. You know, I'm sure even the most experienced of miniature makers curse their own inability to grab things. And I'm just wrapping that around the wire. And what that does is it just covers the wire and sticks back onto itself. This means that it's actually more secure than trying to stick it straight on to that little thin piece of wire. And I'm going to repeat this with the other two I've got here. A little bit of glue onto the paper on that bit of a fold I've got, and then I keep trying to pick these up by the flowers and then realising I shouldn't be picking them up by the flowers. And all that I do is I again repeat this. Now, because it's paper, you can actually use your fingernail and give it a bit of a curl if you want. See? And of course, because it's also paper, while it's still not quite dry, you can actually push it in together a bit better and rearrange it. Now, my last one is the bigger one. Bigger ones are handy when it comes to doing extra bits like this, and I'll put this one around the back, catch it around there, and then pull it away a bit. And then I can sort of squidge it so it looks a bit more sort of plant-like. They're very rough daffodil, but they still look like a daffodil. Now you repeat that with as many daffodils as you want for your piece, and then we're going to stick them together. Now to stick them together, I started off with a bundle just of the green bits, because what you tend to find is you'll get a clump of daffodils and they start off with one bulb and you get one flower, and then the bulb splits and you get a few more together, and you end up with a clump where there's a lot of green and a few flowers. So I've done a big clump and then I've got two individual ones, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick these into here. I'm going to need my tweezers, and I'm going to start off with a single one, and I'm going to put a good blob of glue on the bottom, and I'm going to hold the flower by the metal, and I'm going to put it at the back in amongst the moss. And I do believe it has taken straight off. So I'm going to leave that one for a minute because I don't want to mess with it until the glue has started to cure, and then I'm going to stick in my others, arranging them so that it is pleasing to the eye. Now, I've got my nice little bundle here, which I'm sure you can probably assume is going to go in my big gap, and then I've got another one that I'm going to put more towards the front, and then we'll have the final touch to make this piece the sort of spring inspired piece that I got in mind. It has taken a bit of manoeuvring, but I have got my daffodils inside. Now, I will recommend that you have a cloth or some kitchen towel, paper towel, whatever, because you will get glue places you don't want it. I've had glue all around the outside and I've had to clean it up, and I even got some glue on the inside where I didn't want it, so I used a little cotton swab to sort that out. Now I've got one which has sort of fallen over a little bit at the back. I may get a cocktail stick in there and make it stand up again. Actually, shall we try that? I'll get a cocktail stick, which may or may not be, and make it stand up a little bit. That's better. But I'm happy with it. I've got my little bird bath, I've got my daffodils. Now I just need the reason for the bird bath, and that is this little chap here. Now this is the common or garden blackbird, very common in my garden, and the blackbird in my garden absolutely loves my water feature. And I know it's coming up to spring because he seems to spend all his time taking baths. This little chap came from Etsy. I didn't make him myself, and he hasn't actually got any legs. So I needed a situation to put him in whereby that wouldn't be a problem. And the way that the blackbird sits on my water feature, I figured that that would be the perfect place for him. So I'm going to use a little bit of glue and I'm going to stick him onto the edge of my little bird bath. Hopefully this is going to work quite nicely. And I'm going to try and do this without disturbing anything else that's already in there. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this with the tweezers, whether they will be in the wrong place, but I think I can actually get him into position. No, as I always say, what can go wrong does go wrong, especially when you're on camera. Now, I actually want to make it look like he is in the edge of the water, and I think that might work. So I'm going to sit and stare at him for a while, and then I'll come back and show you the final piece. I am really pleased with my finished piece. Here he is, or rather it is my epitome of spring in a glass egg. This is what spring is to me. And whilst I know it's very different from the stuff I normally do on this channel, I think this is really, really nice. I'm really pleased with it, and I think this is going to be something that I will be using for years to come. I could have done something spookier, obviously, but not everything has to be spooky. I need to clean up the outside of the egg. It is looking a little bit fingerprinty, so I'll be doing that before it's put on display. But while I'm still messing with it for filming purposes, I haven't bothered because I'll only have to do it again. But as I say, I'm really pleased with it, and I like what I've actually managed to make from something quite random. If you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you have, please like, comment and subscribe. And until next time, bye.